The dust devil rose from the parched earth like a vengeful spirit, spinning across the endless Montana plain, as Harrison Blake guided his horse toward the rickety fence line that marked the eastern boundary of his ranch. It was July 1883, and the summer sun beat down mercilessly on the dry grassland stretching toward the distant mountains. Harrison had been riding since dawn, checking on his small herd of cattle scattered across the property, and he was bone-weary from another long day of solitary labor. At 32 years old, he had worked this land for nearly a decade, carving out a modest existence from the unforgiving wilderness near the small settlement of Centralia, Montana. The town itself was barely a dot on any map, just a collection of weathered buildings clustered along a dirt road that led to more prosperous places. He spotted something unusual near the old cottonwood tree that stood sentinel at the crossroads where his property met the main trail. At first, he thought it might be a fallen animal, but as he drew closer, Harrison realized it was a person lying motionless in the sparse shade. His heart quickened as he spurred his horse forward, dismounting quickly when he saw it was a woman, her dark traveling dress torn and dusty, her face pale beneath the grime of hard travel. "Madam, can you hear me?" Harrison knelt beside her, gently touching her shoulder. Her eyes fluttered open, and he found himself looking into the most striking green eyes he had ever seen. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, with auburn hair that had fallen loose from its pins, creating a tangled halo around her face. Her lips were cracked and dry, and she tried to speak but only managed a weak rasp. Harrison immediately uncapped his canteen and carefully lifted her head, allowing her to take small sips of water. "Easy now," he said softly. "Not too fast or you will make yourself sick." She drank gratefully, then managed to whisper, "Thank you." Looking around, Harrison saw no horse, no wagon, nothing to indicate how she had come to be lying alone on this desolate stretch of road. "What happened to you? Where is your horse?" "Gone," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "Spooked by a rattlesnake 2 days ago. I have been walking since yesterday morning, ran out of water at midday." Harrison felt a surge of anger at whoever had allowed this woman to travel alone through such dangerous territory. "Can you stand? My ranch is about a mile from here. I can get you somewhere safe." She nodded, and with his help, managed to get to her feet, though she swayed dangerously. Without hesitation, Harrison scooped her up in his arms and carried her to his horse. She weighed hardly anything, and he could feel how thin she was beneath the layers of her clothing. He settled her in front of him on the saddle, keeping one arm securely around her waist as they began the slow journey back to his homestead. "I am Harrison Blake," he said as they rode. "What is your name?" "Delilah Foster," she replied, her voice still weak but stronger than before. "I was traveling to Helena to meet my brother. He wrote that he had found work there and could provide for me. Our parents passed last winter, and I had nowhere else to go." The simple tragedy of her words struck Harrison deeply. He knew what it was like to be alone in this harsh land. His own parents had died years ago, his father from a fall from a horse and his mother from a fever the following winter. He had no siblings, no close relatives, just this ranch and his solitary existence. "You are safe now," he assured her. "We will get you fed and rested, and then we can figure out how to get word to your brother." Delilah leaned back against his chest, too exhausted to maintain her own posture, and Harrison felt an unexpected warmth spread through him at the contact. It had been so long since he had been close to another person, so long since he had felt anything but the grinding loneliness of his daily routine. The ranch house came into view, a modest single-story structure Harrison had built himself from timber cut in the nearby foothills. It was not much to look at, but it was solid and weatherproof, with a good stone fireplace and a covered porch that provided relief from the sun. Behind it stood a barn, a chicken coop, and a small corral where his 2 remaining horses waited. He helped Delilah down from the saddle and supported her as they walked to the house. Inside, the main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a pot-bellied stove, a rough-hewn table and chairs, and a couple of comfortable chairs near the fireplace. 2 doors led to small bedrooms, one of which Harrison rarely entered since it had been his parents' room. "You can have the spare bedroom," Harrison said, guiding her to sit at the table. "Let me get you some proper food and water first." He moved efficiently around the kitchen, pumping water from the indoor hand pump he had installed with great effort, then setting about heating some of the beef stew he had made 2 days earlier. While it warmed, he cut thick slices of bread and set out butter and a jar of preserves his neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, had given him in trade for fixing her fence last month. Delilah watched him with those striking green eyes, and Harrison felt self-conscious under her gaze. He was not accustomed to being observed in his own home, and he wondered what she must think of his rough bachelor existence. "You are very kind," Delilah said softly. "I do not know what would have happened if you had not found me." Harrison shook his head. "Any decent person would have done the same." "Perhaps," she replied, "but you are the one who actually did it. I owe you my life, Mr. Blake." "Harrison, please," he said, setting a bowl of steaming stew in front of her. "And you do not owe me anything, just eat and rest." She ate slowly at first, then with increasing appetite, and Harrison was pleased to see color returning to her cheeks. He ate his own meal in companionable silence, stealing glances at her when he thought she was not looking. Even disheveled and exhausted, there was something compelling about Delilah Foster. She had a quiet dignity, a strength that showed in the set of her jaw and the directness of her gaze. After they finished eating, Harrison heated water for washing and showed her to the spare bedroom. "There are clean sheets on the bed," he said. "I will bring you some water and a towel. My mother's clothes are still in the dresser. You are welcome to anything that fits." Delilah's eyes filled with tears. "You are too generous." "Rest now," Harrison said gently. "Tomorrow we can make plans." He left her alone and returned to the main room, suddenly aware of how empty the house felt with just himself moving through it. He had grown accustomed to solitude over the years, but now it seemed oppressive rather than peaceful. He could hear Delilah moving around in the bedroom, the soft sounds of someone trying to make herself comfortable in an unfamiliar place. Harrison busied himself with evening chores, feeding the chickens and horses, checking that everything was secure for the night. The sun was setting when he returned to the house, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. He found Delilah standing on the porch, wrapped in one of his mother's old robes, watching the sunset with an expression of wonder. "I have never seen anything quite like this," she said as he approached. "Where I come from in Ohio, the land is so flat and the sky seems smaller somehow. This is magnificent." Harrison stood beside her, seeing the familiar landscape through fresh eyes. "It grows on you," he said. "When I first came here with my parents, I thought it was the loneliest place on earth. Now I cannot imagine living anywhere else." "Were you very young when you came?" 19. "My father had dreams of building something lasting, a legacy for future generations. He died before he could see it really flourish, but I have done my best to honor his vision." Delilah turned to look at him, and in the fading light, her face was soft and sympathetic. "I think he would be proud of what you have accomplished." They stood together in comfortable silence as darkness fell, and the first stars appeared. Harrison pointed out constellations, telling her the stories his father had taught him about the patterns in the sky. Delilah listened with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at some of the more fanciful tales. "You should rest," Harrison finally said. "You have been through an ordeal." "I suppose I should," Delilah agreed, though she sounded reluctant. "Thank you again, Harrison, for everything." That night, lying in his own bed, Harrison found sleep elusive. He kept thinking about Delilah Foster, about the circumstances that had brought her to his doorstep, about the strange twist of fate that had led him to that particular stretch of road at exactly the right moment. He had saved countless animals over the years, pulled calves from difficult births, nursed injured horses back to health, but saving a human life felt different, more significant somehow. He wondered what tomorrow would bring, how long Delilah would stay, and found himself hoping it would be more than just a day or two. The house already felt different with her presence in it, more alive somehow, and he was not eager to return to his solitary existence. Morning came with the crowing of his rooster, and Harrison rose early as always, dressing quietly so as not to disturb his guest. He was surprised to find Delilah already in the kitchen when he emerged from his room. She had found one of his mother's older dresses, a simple blue cotton that fit her reasonably well, and she had managed to brush out her auburn hair and pin it up neatly. She looked transformed from the half-dead woman he had found yesterday. "Good morning," she said with a shy smile. "I hope you do not mind, but I have taken the liberty of starting breakfast. You have been so kind, and I wanted to do something to help." Harrison saw that she had indeed managed to get the stove going and had eggs frying in his cast-iron skillet. The coffee pot was percolating, filling the room with its rich aroma. "You did not have to do that," he said. "You should be resting." "I have rested," Delilah replied, "and I feel much better this morning. Besides, I am not accustomed to sitting idle. It makes me uncomfortable." They ate breakfast together, falling into an easy conversation. Delilah told him more about her life in Ohio, how she had grown up on a small farm with her parents and older brother, Daniel. Their father had been a veteran of the war between the states and had struggled with his health for years, before finally succumbing to pneumonia the previous winter. Their mother had followed him to the grave just weeks later, her heart broken by the loss of her husband. Daniel had already left for Montana the year before, Delilah explained. He wrote regularly, telling us about the opportunities in the territories, how a man could make something of himself out here. After our parents died, I had no reason to stay in Ohio. The farm was heavily mortgaged, and there was no way I could work it alone. So I sold what I could, paid off what debts I could, and bought passage on a train heading west. "How did you end up on that road?" Harrison asked. Delilah's expression clouded. "I got off the train in a town called Three Forks. Daniel's last letter said he would meet me there, but when I arrived, no one had heard of him. I waited for 3 days, but he never came. I hired a man with a wagon to take me to Helena, thinking perhaps I had misunderstood and Daniel was waiting there instead. But the man was drinking heavily, and we got into an argument when he made improper advances. I left his wagon with just my horse and what supplies I could carry. That was 5 days ago." Harrison felt his jaw tighten with anger at the thought of some drunken fool putting Delilah in such danger. "Did he hurt you?" "No," she said quickly. "I left before it could come to that, but I am afraid I was not thinking clearly. I just wanted to get away from him. I thought I could make it to the next town on my own, but I underestimated the distances out here. Everything is so much bigger than I imagined." "You could have died," Harrison said bluntly. "I know." Her voice was quiet, serious. "I know how fortunate I am that you found me." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Harrison said, "We will go into Centralia today. The telegraph office there can send a message to Helena. Try to locate your brother. And I want to report what that wagon driver did. He should not be allowed to prey on travelers." Delilah nodded gratefully. Thank you. I do not want to be a burden to you longer than necessary. You are not a burden, Harrison said firmly, surprised by how much he meant it. You are welcome to stay as long as you need to. The ride into Centralia took about an hour on horseback. Harrison let Delilah ride his better-trained horse while he took his older gelding. The town was indeed small, just a single main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a boarding house, and a few other establishments. The telegraph office was located in the back of the general store, operated by a man named Samuel Wright, who also served as the town's de facto postmaster. Samuel's eyebrows rose with undisguised curiosity when Harrison entered with Delilah. Harrison Blake, as I live and breathe. I do not think I have seen you in town with a lady companion before. Miss Foster had some trouble on the road, Harrison explained, keeping his tone neutral. She needs to send a telegram to Helena. While Delilah composed her message to her brother, explaining her situation and asking him to reply with instructions, Harrison spoke to Samuel about the wagon driver. The storekeeper's expression grew dark as Harrison described what had happened. That sounds like it might be Clem Morrison, Samuel said. He has been hauling freight between Three Forks and Helena for a couple of years. There have been complaints about his drinking before, but nothing this serious. I will make sure the sheriff over in Three Forks hears about it. After sending the telegram, Harrison took Delilah to the general store's main area and insisted on buying her some proper traveling clothes and necessities. She protested, but he was adamant. You lost everything when your horse ran off, he said. You need these things, and I have the means to provide them. Please, let me do this. Delilah finally relented, and they selected several practical items including a new dress, sturdy boots, and various personal items she had been too embarrassed to mention needing. The store also had a small selection of books, and Harrison noticed Delilah's eyes lingering on a volume of poetry. You like to read? He asked. Very much, she admitted. We did not have many books at home, but I would borrow from neighbors whenever I could, poetry especially. There is something about the way words can be arranged to capture a feeling or a moment that fascinates me. Harrison picked up the book and added it to their purchases, ignoring Delilah's protests. I have books at the ranch, he said, but I would not call myself much of a poetry reader. Perhaps you can help me appreciate it better. The smile she gave him made his heart skip unexpectedly. They stopped at the boarding house for lunch, where the proprietor, a motherly woman named Grace Henderson, fussed over Delilah and shot Harrison approving looks. It is good to see you with some company, Harrison, she said warmly. You spend far too much time alone on that ranch. I am just helping Miss Foster until she can reunite with her brother, Harrison explained, but Mrs. Henderson just smiled knowingly. As they ate lunch, several townspeople stopped by their table to be introduced to Delilah. Harrison was struck by how gracefully she handled the attention, answering questions about her journey and her plans without revealing too much personal information. She had a natural warmth that put people at ease, and Harrison could see that the townspeople approved of her. On the ride back to the ranch, Delilah was quieter than she had been on the way into town. Harrison glanced at her several times, noting the pensive expression on her face. Is something troubling you? He finally asked. Delilah was silent for a moment, then said, I have been thinking about what will happen when Daniel replies to the telegram, assuming he does reply. What if he does not? What if something has happened to him, or what if he has moved on and cannot be found? Then we will figure out another solution, Harrison said firmly. You are not going to be left stranded again, Delilah. I give you my word. She turned to look at him, and there was something vulnerable in her expression. Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know anything about me. For all you know, I could be a liar or a thief." Harrison considered his answer carefully. "I do not think you are either of those things. And as for why I am helping you, I suppose it is because I know what it is like to be alone in the world, to feel like you have nowhere to turn. If I can spare someone else that feeling, even for a little while, then that seems like the right thing to do." They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, and when they reached the ranch, Delilah helped him unsaddle the horses and put away their purchases without being asked. She moved around the barn as if she had been doing these chores all her life, and Harrison found himself appreciating her capable competence. Over the next few days, they fell into a natural routine. Harrison would rise early and tend to the most pressing ranch work, while Delilah prepared breakfast. They would eat together, then Delilah would insist on helping with various tasks around the homestead. She proved to be remarkably skilled at a wide variety of work. She could mend fences, tend the vegetable garden Harrison had somewhat neglected, care for the chickens, and cook meals that were far better than Harrison's simple fare. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch as the sun set, talking about everything and nothing. Harrison found himself sharing stories he had not told anyone in years, memories of his parents and his early days on the ranch, dreams he had once harbored but had largely abandoned. Delilah was an excellent listener, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights that surprised him with their wisdom. She also read to him from the poetry book, her voice bringing the verses to life in a way that made Harrison understand their beauty. Sometimes she would read from the Bible or from the other books Harrison kept on a shelf in the main room, old volumes his mother had treasured. A week passed with no response to the telegram. Harrison made another trip into Centralia, this time alone, to check with Samuel Wright. The telegrapher shook his head regretfully. "Nothing yet, Harrison. I sent the message to 3 different stations in Helena, asking them to post notices looking for Daniel Foster. If he is there, someone should find him eventually." Harrison thanked him and rode back to the ranch with a strange mix of emotions. He was concerned for Delilah, worried about her brother and what his absence might mean. But he was also, if he was honest with himself, not entirely disappointed that she would be staying longer. When he arrived back at the ranch, he found Delilah in the vegetable garden, her dress protected by one of his old work shirts, her face flushed from the heat and exertion. She had managed to revive several rows of plants that Harrison had thought beyond saving, and the garden looked better than it had in months. "No word from Daniel," Harrison said, dismounting. Delilah straightened, pushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I was afraid of that." "I am sure we will hear something soon," Harrison said, though he was not at all sure. "In the meantime, you are welcome here. I hope you know that." "I do." Delilah smiled, though there was sadness in her eyes. "You have been so good to me, Harrison. I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You already have," Harrison said. "This place feels less lonely with you here. That is payment enough." The words were out before he could stop them, and Harrison felt his face heat with embarrassment. But Delilah's smile widened, becoming genuine and warm. "It feels less lonely for me too," she said softly. "I did not realize how much I dreaded the thought of finding Daniel and then having to figure out how to make a life in a strange new place where I knew no one. Here, even though I have only been here a short time, I feel like I belong." They stood looking at each other across the vegetable garden, and Harrison felt something shift between them, a recognition of feelings that had been growing beneath the surface. He wanted to say more, to tell her that he hoped she would stay, not just until her brother was found, but forever. But he held back, afraid of presuming too much, afraid of frightening her away. That night, A summer storm rolled across the plains, bringing with it spectacular lightning and crashing thunder. Harrison was awakened by a knock on his bedroom door and opened it to find Delilah standing there in her nightgown, her face pale. "I am sorry to disturb you," she said, "but the storm is quite fierce, and I am afraid I am not accustomed to weather like this. In Ohio, we had a root cellar to shelter in during bad storms." "We have a cellar here too," Harrison said, "but I do not think we need it unless the weather gets much worse. This is just a thunderstorm, nothing to worry about." A particularly loud crash of thunder made Delilah jump, and without thinking, Harrison reached out and took her hand. "Come on," he said. "Let us sit in the main room where we can keep an eye on things." They sat together on the sofa Harrison's mother had insisted on bringing all the way from Missouri, watching through the window as lightning illuminated the landscape in brilliant flashes. The rain pounded on the roof and wind howled around the corners of the house, but inside they were warm and dry. "Tell me about your dreams," Delilah said suddenly. "You mentioned once that you had dreams you had given up. What were they?" Harrison hesitated, then decided there was no reason to hold back. "I wanted a family," he admitted. "When I was younger, I thought I would meet someone, get married, have children. I imagined this ranch being full of life, with kids running around and a wife who would be my partner in building something lasting. But years passed, and it never happened. Most of the young women in these parts either already have their eyes on someone else or are not interested in the hard life a rancher's wife would have to lead. Eventually, I stopped thinking about it, told myself I was content alone." "But you were not," Delilah said. "It was not a question." "No," Harrison admitted. "I was not, but what else could I do? I could not simply conjure a wife out of thin air." Delilah was quiet for a moment, then said, "My dream was similar. I wanted a home of my own, a husband who would value me as a partner, children to raise and love. But the young men back home, the few who were interested in me, saw me as just another farmhand. They wanted someone who could work but who would also stay quiet and obedient. I wanted more than that. I wanted a real partnership, mutual respect and affection." "You deserve that," Harrison said firmly. "Any man would be lucky to have you." She turned to look at him, and in the flickering light from the storm, her green eyes were luminous. "Any woman would be lucky to have you, Harrison Blake. You are one of the kindest, most honorable men I have ever met." They sat together as the storm raged outside, their hands still clasped, and Harrison felt the last of his walls crumbling. He was falling in love with Delilah Foster, had probably been falling since the moment he found her beside that cottonwood tree. The realization should have terrified him, but instead it felt right, inevitable. "Delilah," he began, but she put her free hand to his lips, silencing him. "Not yet," she whispered. "Let us just sit here a little longer." So they sat through the storm, holding hands and watching the lightning, neither of them wanting to break the spell of the moment. By the time the storm finally passed, and the first light of dawn began to color the eastern sky, they had fallen asleep on the sofa, leaning against each other. Harrison woke first, and for a long moment simply looked at Delilah's sleeping face, peaceful and lovely in the early morning light. He did not want to move, did not want to disturb this perfect moment, but there were chores waiting and animals that needed tending. He gently extricated himself and covered Delilah with a blanket from the back of the sofa. She stirred but did not wake, and Harrison quietly let himself out to begin the day's work. The storm had left the air fresh and clean, and everything seemed to sparkle in the morning sunlight. Harrison went about his tasks with unusual energy, his mind replaying the conversations from the night before, the feeling of Delilah's hand in his, the warmth of her presence beside him. When he returned to the house for breakfast, He found Delilah already up and moving around the kitchen. She gave him a shy smile that made his heart race. "Good morning," she said. "I hope you do not mind, but I made pancakes. I found some wild berries yesterday and thought they would be nice to use." "That sounds wonderful," Harrison said. They ate breakfast in companionable silence, though Harrison was acutely aware of every glance, every small movement Delilah made. The air between them seemed charged with unspoken feelings, and Harrison knew they could not continue like this indefinitely. They needed to talk about what was happening between them, but before he could figure out how to begin that conversation, they heard the sound of an approaching horse. Harrison went to the window and saw a rider coming up the path to the house, a man he did not recognize. "Are you expecting anyone?" Delilah asked, moving to stand beside him. "No," Harrison said, reaching for the rifle he kept near the door. It was not uncommon for trouble to arrive on horseback in Montana, and he had learned to be cautious. They stepped out onto the porch as the rider approached. He was a man in his early 30s, with dark hair and a weathered face that spoke of hard living. He wore the clothes of a working man, sturdy and practical, and he rode a good horse that showed signs of having traveled far recently. "Can I help you?" Harrison called out as the rider drew near. The man dismounted and looked from Harrison to Delilah. His eyes widened with recognition. "Delilah, is that you?" "Daniel." Delilah's voice was filled with disbelief. She rushed forward and the man caught her in a tight embrace. Harrison felt his stomach drop as he realized he was looking at Daniel Foster, the brother Delilah had been trying to reach. The brother whose arrival meant Delilah would be leaving. Daniel held Delilah at arm's length, looking her over with concern. "When I got your telegram, I could not believe it. I have been frantic. I sent you a letter 3 months ago telling you not to come yet, that I had lost my job and was having to move around looking for work. Did you not receive it?" "No," Delilah said, tears streaming down her face. "I never got any letter. The last one I received was from 6 months ago, saying you were in Helena and had steady work." Daniel's face darkened. "That letter must have gotten lost. I am so sorry, Dee. If I had known you were coming, I would have met you. I would never have left you stranded like that." "It is all right," Delilah said. "I am all right. Mr. Blake here saved me. I might have died if not for him." Daniel turned to Harrison, his expression serious. He extended his hand. "Then I owe you a debt I can never repay. Thank you for taking care of my sister." Harrison shook his hand, forcing himself to smile. "I was glad to help. Your sister is a remarkable woman." "She is indeed." Daniel looked back at Delilah. "I got work on a ranch about 20 miles west of here, near a town called Boulder. The pay is decent, and they have a small cabin where I have been staying. There is room for you there, Dee. It is not much, but it is better than nothing." Harrison watched Delilah's face, trying to read her expression. She looked torn, her gaze moving between her brother and Harrison. "I need to gather my things," she said slowly. "Of course." Daniel nodded. "I will wait out here with Mr. Blake." Delilah disappeared into the house, leaving the two men standing awkwardly on the porch. Harrison leaned the rifle against the wall, suddenly feeling exhausted. "My sister told me you took her in when she was in desperate straits," Daniel said. "That is not something I will forget. If there is ever anything I can do to repay you, you only need to ask." "There is no debt," Harrison said. "I did what anyone would have done." "Not anyone," Daniel disagreed. "There are plenty of men who would have taken advantage of a woman in Delilah's situation. The fact that you treated her with respect and kindness says a lot about your character." They stood in silence for a moment, then Daniel said, "She seems happy here." Harrison glanced at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "Just that I have not seen my sister look this content in years. Even before our parents died, she always seemed restless, like she was waiting for something. But just now, when I first saw her, she looked different. Peaceful, maybe. Before Harrison could respond, Delilah emerged from the house carrying a small bundle of belongings. She had changed into her traveling clothes and had pinned up her hair. She looked every inch the capable frontier woman, and Harrison felt a surge of pride mixed with sorrow. "I am ready," she said quietly. Daniel nodded and moved toward his horse. Harrison caught Delilah's arm gently. "Wait," he said. "Can I speak with you alone for a moment?" Delilah nodded, and Daniel diplomatically walked his horse a short distance away. "Delilah, I know you need to go with your brother," Harrison began, the words coming out in a rush. "I know you have obligations to family, and I would never ask you to ignore those, but I need you to know that these past 2 weeks have been the best of my life. Having you here, talking with you, working alongside you, it has made me realize what I have been missing all these years. I think I am falling in love with you. No, that is not true. I know I am falling in love with you. And if there is any chance at all that you might feel the same way, I would ask you to consider staying, or at least to think about coming back when you have had time to settle things with Daniel." Delilah's eyes were bright with tears. "Harrison, I do feel the same way. That is what makes this so difficult. Part of me wants to stay here with you to see where these feelings might lead, but Daniel is my only family and he needs me. He came all this way to find me." "I understand," Harrison said, though his heart was breaking. "I do. But promise me you will think about what I said. Promise me this is not goodbye forever." "I promise," Delilah whispered. She reached up and touched his face, her hand soft against his rough cheek. "Thank you, Harrison, for everything." Then she turned and walked to where Daniel waited with his horse. Harrison helped her mount, and the siblings rode away together, heading west toward Boulder. Harrison stood on his porch and watched until they disappeared from view, then went into his empty house and sat at the table where just that morning he and Delilah had shared breakfast. The house felt hollow without her presence. The rooms that had seemed cozy and comfortable now felt small and confining. Harrison looked at the book of poetry still sitting on the side table where Delilah had left it, at the apron hanging on a hook by the stove, at all the small signs of her brief presence in his life. He told himself he was being foolish. He had known Delilah for barely 2 weeks. It was absurd to feel this devastated by her departure. But his heart did not care about logic or reason. His heart only knew that something precious had been taken away. The days that followed were the longest Harrison had ever endured. He threw himself into work, finding every possible task to keep himself busy from dawn until well past dark. He repaired fences that did not really need repairing, reorganized the barn twice, and started work on expanding the chicken coop, even though his current flock did not need the extra space. Mrs. Henderson came out to the ranch a few days after Delilah left, bringing a basket of food and a knowing look. "I heard Daniel Foster came and took his sister away," she said as Harrison helped her down from her wagon. "News travels fast," Harrison said with a slight smile. "It is a small community," Mrs. Henderson replied. "And people noticed how you looked at Miss Foster when you brought her into town. They also noticed how you look now, like a man who has lost something important." Harrison did not bother denying it. "I did not expect to meet someone like her. I was not prepared for how much it would hurt when she left." Mrs. Henderson patted his arm sympathetically. "Love has a way of surprising us, but you should not give up hope. If it is meant to be, she will find her way back to you. And if it is not meant to be, then at least you will know you opened your heart and took a chance. That is more than many people can say." Harrison thought about Mrs. Henderson's words often in the weeks that followed. He received no word from Delilah, and he told himself that was for the best. She was with her brother, establishing a new life, and he had no right to interfere with that. But then, 6 weeks after Delilah left, Harrison made his regular trip into Centralia and found Samuel Wright waiting for him at the general store with a telegram. "This came for you yesterday," Samuel said, handing over the thin paper. "From Boulder." Harrison's hands shook slightly as he opened it. The message was brief. "Please come, need to see you, Delilah." He looked up at Samuel. "Can I send a reply, of course?" Harrison scrawled his response quickly. "Leaving tomorrow morning." He could not leave immediately because there were animals that needed tending, but he worked with frantic efficiency to complete all his essential tasks and arrange for his neighbor, a rancher named James Morgan, to check on things while he was gone. By dawn the next day, he was on the road to Boulder, pushing his horse as fast as he dared. The ride took most of the day, and the sun was low on the horizon when Harrison finally reached the small town. He stopped at the first building he saw, a saloon, and asked directions to the ranch where Daniel Foster worked. "The Henderson place, about 3 miles north of here," the bartender told him. "But if you are looking for Foster, he is not there right now. Saw him in town about an hour ago, heading to the church." "The church?" Harrison's stomach tightened with worry. "Is someone hurt?" "Not that I know of. Think there was some kind of meeting happening." Harrison thanked him and turned his horse toward the church, a small white building at the edge of town. As he approached, he saw several horses tied outside and lamplight glowing through the windows. He dismounted and pushed open the door, then stopped in surprise. The interior of the church was decorated with wildflowers, and a small group of people stood near the altar. Harrison recognized Daniel Foster and, standing beside him, Delilah. She was wearing a simple white dress, and her hair was adorned with flowers. Everyone turned to look as Harrison entered, and Delilah's face broke into a radiant smile. "You came," she said, her voice filled with joy. "Your telegram said you needed to see me," Harrison said, his mind spinning as he tried to understand what he was seeing. "What is happening here?" "I am getting married," Delilah said. She walked toward him, her eyes never leaving his face. "That is, if you will have me. I know this is sudden, and I know we have not known each other long, but these past weeks without you have been unbearable. I thought I needed to be with Daniel, to help him and to rebuild our family connection. And Daniel has been wonderful, truly he has. But every day I found myself thinking about you, missing you, wishing I was back at the ranch." Daniel could see how unhappy I was, and finally, he told me I was being foolish. He said it was obvious I had fallen in love with you, and that I should stop wasting time and go after what I wanted. Harrison looked past her to Daniel, who nodded. "It is true," Daniel said. "I love my sister, but I could see her heart was not here with me. It was back on your ranch with you, so I told her to send you that telegram and to get everything ready for a wedding. I figured if you loved her as much as she loves you, you would come." "You figured right," Harrison said, his voice rough with emotion. He looked back at Delilah, taking in every detail of her face, the hope and uncertainty in her eyes. "I love you, Delilah Foster. I loved you from almost the first moment I saw you. I have been miserable every day since you left." "Then marry me," Delilah said. "Right here, right now. I have already spoken with the minister, and these good people have agreed to serve as witnesses. All I need is for you to say yes." Harrison closed the distance between them and took her hands in his. "Yes," he said. 1,000 times yes." The ceremony was simple but beautiful. The minister, a kindly older man named Reverend Thomas, led them through their vows as the small group of witnesses watched. Harrison had never seen Delilah look more beautiful than she did at that moment. her face glowing with happiness as she promised to love and honor him for the rest of her life. When the minister finally pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison pulled Delilah into his arms and kissed her with all the passion and love he had been holding back for weeks. The witnesses applauded, and Daniel clapped Harrison on the back. "Welcome to the family," Daniel said with a grin. "Take good care of my sister." "I will," Harrison promised. "You have my word." There was a small celebration afterward at the boarding house where Daniel had been staying, with cake and coffee and much laughter. Harrison learned that the witnesses were people Delilah had befriended during her time in Boulder, good people who had supported her decision to follow her heart. As the evening drew to a close, Daniel pulled Harrison aside. "I want you to know something," he said seriously. "Delilah is the most important person in my life. She took care of our parents when they were sick, sacrificed her own chances at happiness to make sure they were comfortable. She deserves every bit of joy she can find. Make her happy, Harrison. That is all I ask." "I intend to spend every day of my life trying," Harrison replied. Daniel smiled and shook his hand. "That is good enough for me." Harrison and Delilah left Boulder the next morning, riding together back to the ranch. They took their time, stopping frequently to rest the horses and to simply enjoy being together. They talked about everything and nothing, making plans for the future and sharing stories from their pasts. "I cannot believe you arranged all of that," Harrison said as they rode across a flower-dotted meadow. "The church, the witnesses, the minister. When did you have time to do it all?" "I have been planning it for 2 weeks," Delilah admitted. "Ever since Daniel told me to stop moping and go get you. I wanted everything to be ready so that if you said yes, we could be married immediately. I did not want to waste another day." "You were that sure I would say yes." "I was hopeful," Delilah said with a smile. "You did tell me you were falling in love with me. I chose to believe you meant it." "I did mean it," Harrison said. "I do mean it. I love you, Delilah Blake." "I love the sound of that," Delilah said. "Delilah Blake. It feels right." They reached the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Harrison helped Delilah down from her horse, and they stood together looking at the house that was now truly their home. "It is not much," Harrison said, "but we can make improvements over time. Add on rooms when we need them, make it more comfortable." "It is perfect," Delilah said firmly. "It is ours, and that makes it perfect." They walked inside hand in hand, and Harrison lit the lamps while Delilah looked around with fresh eyes, seeing not a bachelor's rough quarters but a home they would build together. That night, they sat on the porch as they had done so many times before, but now Delilah was curled against Harrison's side, his arm around her shoulders, and everything felt different. There was no uncertainty now, no question of whether she would stay or leave. She was his wife, and he was her husband, and their future stretched out before them full of possibility. "Tell me about your dreams again," Delilah said softly. "The ones you thought you had given up on." "A family," Harrison said. "A house full of life and love, children running around. Growing old with someone I love by my side." "Those are my dreams too," Delilah said. "And now we can make them come true together." The first months of their marriage were a time of adjustment and joy. Delilah threw herself into making the ranch house a real home, adding curtains to the windows, planting flowers around the porch, and slowly transforming the stark spaces into warm, welcoming rooms. Harrison expanded the house as he had promised, adding a proper parlor and a larger kitchen, working late into the evening by lamplight to create more space for the family they hoped to have. They worked side by side during the day, Delilah proving to be as capable a rancher as Harrison had suspected. She could rope a calf, tend to sick animals, and ride as well as any man. but she also brought a softness to the ranch that had been missing, a sense of care and attention to detail that made everything better. Daniel visited several times, always staying a few days to help with large projects and to assure himself that his sister was happy. He and Harrison developed a genuine friendship, bonding over their shared love for Delilah and their mutual respect for hard work. The seasons changed, summer giving way to fall and then to the harsh Montana winter. Harrison and Delilah faced the cold months together, keeping the house warm and the animals fed, spending long evenings reading by the fire or talking about their plans for the spring. It was during that winter that Delilah told Harrison she was expecting a child. They had been married for 7 months, and the news filled Harrison with a joy so profound he could hardly speak. He simply held Delilah close, feeling her heart beat against his, and thanked God for the miracle of this woman in his life. "I hope it is a boy," Delilah said. "A son who looks just like his father." "I will love whatever child we have," Harrison replied. "Boy or girl, it does not matter. As long as you and the baby are healthy, that is all I care about." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Harrison worried constantly. Mrs. Henderson came out to the ranch frequently, checking on Delilah and bringing advice and supplies. She had delivered many babies in her time and assured Harrison that Delilah was strong and healthy. Spring arrived, bringing with it new life in every form. The cattle calved, the garden began to grow, and in late April, Delilah went into labor. Mrs. Henderson arrived to help, and Daniel rode out from Boulder to be there for his sister. Harrison paced the porch while the women worked inside, Daniel keeping him company and trying to distract him with conversation. The hours stretched on endlessly, and Harrison's worry grew with each passing minute. Finally, as the sun was setting, Mrs. Henderson emerged with a smile on her face. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, beautiful boy, and Delilah is doing wonderfully." Harrison rushed inside to find Delilah propped up in bed, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up as he entered, her smile more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Harrison approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the small face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and his eyes were closed, his tiny features perfect and miraculous. "He is beautiful," Harrison whispered. "You are amazing. I love you so much." "I love you too," Delilah said. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but had not settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Harrison said, "Henry. Henry Thomas Blake, after both our fathers." "Henry," Delilah repeated, testing the name. "I love it. Henry Thomas Blake. Welcome to the world, little one." Daniel came in to meet his nephew, and there were tears in his eyes as he looked at the baby. "He is perfect, Dee. Just perfect. Our parents would be so proud." The days and weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Harrison had thought he knew what joy was, but holding his son, watching Delilah nurse him and sing to him, experiencing the simple miracle of this new life they had created, he realized he had not truly understood the depth of happiness that was possible. Henry was a good baby, healthy and strong, with a curious nature that showed itself early. As he grew, he began to look more and more like Harrison, with the same dark eyes and strong features, though he had Delilah's auburn hair. Life settled into a new rhythm. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Harrison hired a hand to help with the work, a young man named Thomas Green who lived in a small cabin Harrison built near the barn. With the extra help, Harrison had more time to spend with Delilah and Henry, and he treasured every moment. When Henry was 2 years old, Delilah became pregnant again. This time she hoped for a girl, and Harrison found himself hoping for the same thing, imagining a daughter with Delilah's green eyes and quick smile. The pregnancy was more difficult this time, and Delilah was often tired and unwell. Harrison worried constantly, but Mrs. Henderson assured him this was not uncommon for second pregnancies. Delilah took it all in stride, continuing to manage the household and care for Henry even when she was feeling poorly. In the fall of 1886, their daughter was born. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Harrison feared he might lose both Delilah and the baby. But Mrs. Henderson was skilled and experienced, and she guided Delilah through it all. When Harrison finally heard the baby's first cry, he nearly collapsed with relief. "A girl," Mrs. Henderson announced, "and she is perfect." They named her Rose Evelyn Blake, Rose for the wildflowers that grew all over their property and Evelyn for Delilah's mother. She had Delilah's red hair and Harrison's dark eyes, and from the moment she was born, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Henry, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, singing to her the songs Delilah sang to him, bringing her his favorite toys to look at. Watching his son care for his daughter, Harrison felt his heart might burst with love for his family. Daniel visited when Rose was a month old, bringing his new wife, a kind woman named Margaret whom he had met at the ranch where he worked. They stayed for a week, and Harrison enjoyed seeing his brother-in-law so happy and settled. "You started something," Daniel told Harrison one evening as they sat on the porch watching the children play. Henry was running around the yard while Margaret held baby Rose. "I saw how happy you and Delilah were, and I realized I wanted that for myself. Margaret is the best thing that ever happened to me." "I am glad," Harrison said sincerely. "Everyone deserves to find what Delilah and I have." As the years passed, the ranch continued to thrive. Harrison was able to expand his herd significantly, and he became known throughout the region as a fair and honest rancher. People came to him for advice, and he was elected to serve on the town council in Centralia. Delilah became known for her kindness and generosity. She helped start a school in Centralia, teaching there 2 days a week once Rose was old enough to be left with Harrison or Mrs. Henderson. She also organized relief efforts for families that fell on hard times, and she became a beloved figure in the community. Henry and Rose grew into bright, capable children. Henry was serious and responsible, already showing signs that he would one day be an excellent rancher. Rose was spirited and adventurous, always getting into some scrape or another, but with a kind heart that endeared her to everyone she met. When Henry was 8 and Rose was 6, Delilah became pregnant again. This time there were no complications, and she gave birth easily to twins, a boy and a girl they named James William and Sarah Grace. Harrison joked that they now had their own little tribe, and the house was always filled with noise and laughter and the chaos of family life. The twins were followed 3 years later by another son, Samuel Robert, who was quieter than his siblings but with a gentle nature that made him a favorite with everyone. With 5 children, the ranch house had to be expanded again, and Harrison built a second story, creating bedrooms for all the children and a larger space for the family to gather. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters when they lost cattle, dry summers when the crops failed, illnesses that struck the children and left Harrison and Delilah terrified. But they faced every challenge together, their love for each other and their family giving them the strength to persevere. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Harrison took Delilah on a trip to Helena, their first time away from the ranch and children for more than a day since they had married. Mrs. Henderson and Daniel stayed at the ranch to care for the children, and Harrison and Delilah had 3 glorious days to themselves. They stayed in a hotel, ate in restaurants, and walked the streets of the city hand in hand like young lovers. On their last evening, they stood on a hill overlooking the city, watching the sunset. "Do you ever regret it?" Harrison asked. "Marrying me, living on the ranch, all of this?" Delilah looked at him in astonishment. "Regret it? Harrison, these have been the best years of my life. I have everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed possible. How could I regret any of it?" "It has been a hard life sometimes," Harrison said. "Long winters, difficult work, worry about money and the children. I sometimes wonder if you might have been happier with an easier path." Delilah took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me, Harrison Blake. I have never been happier than I am with you. Yes, life has been hard sometimes, but we have faced every challenge together. We have built something beautiful, a family and a life that most people only dream about. I would not change a single moment of it." "I love you," Harrison said, pulling her close. "More now than I did the day we married, which I would not have thought possible." "I love you too," Delilah whispered against his chest. "Always and forever." The years continued to pass, marked by the milestones of their children's lives. Henry grew into a fine young man, taking on more and more responsibility for the ranch. At 20, he met and married a young woman from Centralia named Emily, and they built a house on the eastern portion of the ranch property. Within a year, they presented Harrison and Delilah with their first grandchild, a boy named Harrison after his grandfather. Rose followed her mother's path into teaching, though she was more interested in adventure than settling down. She traveled to San Francisco for a year, working as a teacher there before returning to Montana and eventually marrying a newspaperman from Helena. They lived in town but visited the ranch frequently, and Rose always said she carried the ranch in her heart wherever she went. The younger children all found their own paths. James took after his father and worked the ranch alongside Henry. Sarah married a doctor and moved to Billings. Samuel, the quiet one, surprised everyone by becoming a minister and taking a position at the church in Centralia. Through it all, Harrison and Delilah remained at the heart of the family. Their home was the place where everyone gathered for holidays and celebrations, where grandchildren came to learn about ranching and hear stories of the old days, where love and laughter were always abundant. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were now 15 grandchildren, ranging in age from newborn to 12 years old, and the house was bursting with people and noise and joy. Harrison stood on the porch, watching his children and grandchildren run and play in the yard, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Daniel and Margaret were there, their own children grown now and starting families of their own. Mrs. Henderson, now elderly but still sharp as a tack, sat in a rocking chair holding the newest baby. Delilah came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. She was 50 now, her auburn hair streaked with silver, but to Harrison she was as beautiful as the day he had found her beside that cottonwood tree. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how lucky I am," Harrison replied. "About how one day, one decision to ride a different route, changed my entire life. If I had not found you that day, none of this would exist. These children, these grandchildren, this family, this life we have built together. It all came from that one moment." "I think about that too sometimes," Delilah said. "About how close I came to dying out there on that road, about how my life could have gone so differently. But fate brought us together, Harrison. We were meant to find each other. Do you remember what you said to me that day in Boulder?" "That you would repay my kindness," Delilah smiled. "I do. I promised you a lifetime of love. You have given me so much more than that, Harrison said. You have given me everything. A home, a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up every morning grateful for another day. You saved me just as surely as I saved you. They stood together, watching their family, and Harrison knew that whatever time they had left would be spent just like this, together, surrounded by the love they had created. The years rolled on, bringing more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. Harrison and Delilah watched their ranch pass into Henry's capable hands while they settled into a comfortable retirement, still living in the ranch house but no longer responsible for the daily operations. They spent their days tending the garden, reading on the porch, taking long walks through the land they loved. They visited their children and grandchildren, attended church services where Samuel preached, and remained pillars of the community they had helped build. On quiet evenings, Harrison would sometimes read poetry to Delilah from that same book he had bought her all those years ago, and she would smile and remember the young woman she had been, frightened and alone on a desolate road, and the lonely rancher who had taken pity on her. Harrison passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with Delilah lying beside him as she had for 46 years of marriage. The entire community turned out for his funeral, testament to the impact he had made on so many lives. He was laid to rest in the cemetery in Centralia, on a hill overlooking the land he had loved. Delilah lived for 3 more years, spending her time surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She remained sharp and engaged until the very end, telling stories of the old days and making sure the younger generations understood their family history. She spoke often of Harrison, of the kindness he had shown her, of the life they had built together. She told her grandchildren that true love was not just a feeling but a choice, a daily decision to honor and cherish the person you had chosen to walk through life beside. When Delilah finally passed, she was buried beside Harrison beneath the wide Montana sky. Her tombstone read simply, Delilah Blake, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she repaid kindness with a lifetime of love. The ranch remained in the family for generations, each new Blake adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the foundation Harrison and Delilah had laid. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but the original structure remained, and family members would point out the rooms where Harrison and Delilah had lived, where their children had been born, where so much love had flourished. The cottonwood tree where Harrison had found Delilah eventually died, but before it fell, someone carved into it. Here began a love story. And though the tree is gone now, replaced by a stone marker, people still stop there sometimes. Travelers on the road who have heard the tale of the lonely rancher and the stranded traveler, and they think about fate and kindness and the unexpected ways that love can enter a life and transform it completely. In Centralia, which grew from a tiny settlement into a proper town over the decades, there is a park named Blake Park, donated by the family in honor of Harrison and Delilah. In the center stands a statue of a cowboy helping a woman to her feet, capturing forever the moment when 2 lonely souls found each other in the vast Montana wilderness and began a journey that would create a legacy of love lasting far beyond their own lifetimes. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right across the plains, old-timers say you can still feel it, the love that Harrison and Delilah built, radiating out from that ranch like warmth from a fire, touching everyone who comes near it and reminding them that kindness repaid with love is the greatest gift anyone can give or receive.